Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to the show. We have Joe C. back on the podcast, my personal favorite guest, and we're going to be talking about emotional sobriety, stewardship, and service. And he's written this excellent Grapevine. Was it for the Grapevine publication or just a blog post about it?
No, I was channeling the zeitgeist of the Grapevine, because I was talking to you guys about we should talk about emotional sobriety in the traditions. You know, you've done emotional sobriety in the steps. What about the rest of the process? And then the Grapevine came out with this whole article devoted to service in recovery. And so I sort of channeled their thought pattern at the same time. Anyway, you were complimenting me. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, it's great to see you. Great to see you again. And, I think I'm at a point in my recovery where, I hope that I'll be taking my cake for 5 years in May. I can navel gaze a bit much at times. I go to less physical meetings since COVID. I do many virtual. My connection to community and kind of like the more obvious vectors for service, sometimes I get a little bit lost in the woods.
You're talking about this like you're apologizing that you're not doing enough service. This is service. This is helping the still suffering addict. All of the engineering you do when Thom and I go about our day, that's service. The stuff you do up front is service. The stuff you do behind the scenes is service. And that's the point of it. I mean, I can encapsulate what I rambled on in my March blog about in just a few sentences, and then you guys can say which direction you want us to take this, because we can go anywhere. But we talk about recovery, but the AA or any other sort of paradigm for recovery is described as like a three-legged stool: recovery, unity, service. And it isn't you do one and then you do the other and then you do the other. Otherwise, you're sitting on a one-legged stool for a while, and that's never going to work. And we show great leadership in recovery, helping the still suffering through the step process, reading together, sponsorship. But then we just sort of point them and say, now go show your gratitude and do some service. And we send them out alone to do that. And then we wonder why so few people are engaged in the, organizational part of recovery and our fellowship and getting involved. And maybe we just don't do enough in terms of, bringing them along to the intergroup meetings, bringing a newcomer to the district meeting or an area assembly. I just learned a new word from Bill Shaberg. He's the author of writing the big book, The Creation of AA, and he calls himself a communitarian. And communitarianism isn't it great? Emphasizes the connection between the individual and the community. Its overriding philosophy is based upon the belief that a person's social identity and personality is largely modified by community relationships, and with a smaller degree on individualism. And our first tradition is the common welfare comes first. But if you read it, it says individual considerations are not excluded. Just we have to put the needs of the whole before the needs of the one.
I just remember that bit from your blog that I really kind of honed in on, is that, not self-help, but mutual aid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer, because you don't just help yourself and then get on with your life. Some people do, and there's no wrong way to do AA. There's no right way to do AA. Or again, these things would apply to, a Buddhist approach to things with Dharma recovery or refuge recovery. They would apply to a She Recovers or a Women for Sobriety, or a religious approach to recovery. You can't get away from the fact that recovery is contagious. We catch it from other people who are displaying the sort of pro-social behaviors that that we need to incorporate in our lives. And so it involves other people. And the point is that not that I have a duty to go and put on a meeting because someone put on a meeting for me. That's part of it, sure. But the reality is the best of my emotional sobriety has come from those boring committee meetings and the difficult business meetings and the stuff where you really test your emotional sobriety.
Yeah, if you want to test emotional sobriety, as far as I'm concerned, go to a meeting. I'm not talking about AA meeting. Go to some administrative meeting about something. Then
right.
You get it. Like we're go like, okay, let's all talk about this and say the same thing 3 more times, and then we'll have a coffee break. You teach by demonstration, or I guess this is part of attraction, not promotion, right?
It is. It's sort of like making it attractive as opposed to making it a responsibility. Can I do more when I do a lead or share my story to talk about my journey in the service part of AA? You know, what I've gotten like emotionally and, you know, in terms of meaning in my life and in going through archives at the General Service Conference, right? What I've gotten, you talk about being at a business meeting outside of recovery, and everyone needs to hear themselves talk. And you can see the politics of work and the empire builders. And the smartest voice in the room is the introvert who never gets a chance to talk. We see that, but we learn some things in sort of bloodying our nose and in difficult business meetings and being a general service rep that grow new muscles that make us better in those situations. And even our relationships at home, we hear things in our head, right? You know, principles before personalities.
Absolutely.
It's not all about me, all those kinds of things that emotional sobriety
I have the
about.
serenity prayer on endless loop, you know, in my head. You know, I'm trying to stop saying endless loop tape because I realize we're getting to generations.
Nobody knows what a tape
Nobody
is.
knows what I'm talking about.
Hey, I know what you guys are talking about.
But you know, the other thing though I think about along these lines is I'm thinking of it in terms of some of the therapy I've done with folks. It's like sometimes for me with people, it begins with talking to them about how they do in grocery store lines, you know, and this is definitely that's a place to take your emotional sobriety for sure, and to witness lots of different levels of that. And but the idea, and I have one particular person. She's kind of a somebody I'm mentoring for several years now, and it's like not a client per se, but it was she's a really angry person, or grew up very angry, and she had every reason to. If you knew her life story, you go like, why aren't you more mad? You know, it's like, but she's actually one of the kindest people I know. And, you know, and she's one of those people that doesn't throw hand grenades at others. She falls on them herself, you know, and takes a lot of damage. But one of the things that was really hard was she's part of that anger is impatience. You know, people don't think about that as an anger issue, but it is. Impatience is among other things a contributor to anger. And we just started talking about looking for opportunities in her life just to be kind to other people, just to have exchanges, to be kind to people, and think about what it feels like. And it's like, and I'm thinking about when you're talking about this, the bigger panning back to the service work, it's the same thing. It's the same feeling. It's like, you know, I may drag myself to something I said I would do for somebody and go, I don't want to do that. You know, when I committed to it, it seemed like a good idea, but I've never done that where once I was doing it, once it was done, that I regretted it. You know, it's like you run better energy through yourself when you're being kind and being of help to people.
Yeah, it doesn't help one person. It helps both people. All right.
I like to say a couple things. Joe, you really helped me by asking me 1 week to. Well, what happened was that you asked me to speak at a meeting 1 week, and then at that meeting, I met somebody else who asked me to participate in a meeting, I think the following night or maybe 2 nights later. And I wasn't aware until after I did it, but I was feeling kind of like, I I don't know, just kind of alienated, I guess, or like not, I hadn't been going to as many meetings, and then the quality I felt of my connection to those meetings wasn't as good. And, by you just kind of, you have a habit from all your, time in these spaces, and kind of like, people know you, and you're pretty heavily connected. And by like sharing that connection, or kind of like trying to cultivate it, like I felt that I was really kind of boosted, in my, the quality of my connection to recovery and to other people. And, that's definitely like a lesson I want to try and, pay that forward, or kind of like, if I could just, kind of, if I can give that to others, I think that would be really good. And then on top of that, I've been thinking a lot lately about, I wish there was more I could do, and maybe if you guys think of anything you could tell me, to help the alcoholic that still suffers. There's like a couple people in my life who are still drinking and using and suffering greatly. And it's attraction, not promotion. It's hard to watch. I wish there was more I could do, I guess, to.
Some people are more interventionists than I am. If someone asks, I drop everything I'm doing. They have my full, complete, and undivided attention. Absolutely. But other people are good at challenging their friends, not because I'm being critical, not because, I'm fault finding, because I love you, because I care, because I'm concerned. I want to challenge you on your drinking habits. I think they're self-harm. Can we talk about that? And I'm not that person. Maybe Thom is, I don't know, but I'm more like Patrick.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not a. Although I was when I was drunk. By the way, I was an alcoholism counselor long before I got sober, and I mean, in one of the most embarrassing stories I can tell, and it's like I've worked through a lot, but I can feel it now. It's like it still carries some embarrassment that I'm working through. Is I used to go living in Nashville here, and we go to the place called the Bullpen Lounge. It was a big country music place, and I mean, lots of people, and I would hand out my business cards to people that I was drinking with that I thought had a problem with alcohol. It's like I was shit faced. Keep in mind, I just thought they were drunker.
I heard a story of a Catholic priest in I don't know if it was Northern Ireland or Dublin, but he would go to the church. You have to meet people where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like to help them, and he was drunker than they were, right?
That's good. Absolutely. It's like it's amazing how. I used to say when I'd be working with people in early recovery, they would say, "Oh, I'm so stupid," and I used to rescue them immediately. Oh no, it's not stupidity; it's a disease. And so now I have a much briefer response, which is, yeah, that's one of the things that alcoholism does. It makes otherwise intelligent people shit dumb. It's like just dumber than you can possibly imagine. It's like because you're operating off of a different value system entirely. You and you're completely go back to our topic. You're completely isolated. I want to go back to something that you said, Patrick, about Joe, and I can't remember if you didn't say it this way, but you were saying that something about it's very natural for Joe to be of service, and I whether you used it or I came up with it, I just thought, yeah, it's a habit. He has a habit of being of service. It's like
a learned habit.
Yeah, it moved from that. It's moved into that unconscious competence part where it's like you just respond in that way. And what a way to share. And this is one of the things I want to say to you, Patrick. You're probably contributing more than you know, because we're always sending out the ripple effect of our lives and of our recovery. And So just even if you just have contact with those people at all, I mean, and that doesn't mean you have to, because sometimes that's not good for us. But it's like, you're giving the attraction part a chance to work. You know, you're the guy there that's not using, not drinking. But I want to go back even farther to where you talked about going to the meeting that Joe had asked you to speak at, and then, that's Joe's ripple effect hitting your ripple effect. You talk to some people, they hear you, that something's happening there. Another person there, connects with you. I just like to picture our ripple effect coming out from all of us all the time. It's like, we don't have any choice about that. We have choice about what kind of ripple effect we're sending out. But it's because I was sending, when I was recruiting clients at the Bullpen Lounge when I was drunk, that was, I'm rippling, but I'm not doing it in a good way.
One of the things in my early sobriety, while I was secretly ambivalent, I was planning my escape, I was saying all the right things, but I didn't see a future for me in recovery. They got me not coming to meetings and observing them, but participating. Could you make the coffee next Saturday? Sure. And that became a regular commitment where they gave me the key and I was setting up the chairs and making coffee. Now I'm engaged. I'm engaged in the recovery community. And while I'm in my waffling, I got to figure out a way where I can still do acid and be sober, or like nobody comes here looking for the straight edge life for the rest of my life thing. They just want to get the heat off. They want to find the loophole, like I understand that. But what they did with me in that state is they got me speaking at high schools. Someone who knew a little bit about AA from public information would just bring me along to share my story as a youth in addiction and in early recovery. But I'd be there observing how they're talking about AA. I'd see how the other students are responding to it. I felt like I was giving back to my community, and now I'm hooked, right? That's a drug I need more of every day.
The first one's free. Yeah. It's like, but yeah, you and Patrick, one of the things to notice about this is just to take how they're influencing Joe. The interventions we do are just little mini interventions. How do we get Joe to how do we possibly get Joe to lighten up about this or loosen up about this? Is, oh, well, let's have him make the coffee. Let's have him go do a speak. It's like when you say you speak, you're ambivalent and you're speaking to students. It's like I think of a quotation from one of Richard Bach's novels called Illusions, and it says, "We teach best what we most need to learn," and God, is that true? It's like, the idea that we teach best what we most need to learn. It's like, I mean, how many times have any of us been actually saying something, sharing something with somebody, and have the light bulb come on at the same time that oh, I'm not doing this. I call it the principle of hypocrisy. It's like we need to take advantage of it. It's like recognize when we're actually presenting a better version of ourselves than we actually are, and rather than go into shame about that, like I would have in the past easily, I say, okay, well, it's time for me to up my game.
Saying yes to things as much as possible has helped me a lot. And also not focusing as much, and now this is the part that might be stickier, but like not focusing as much on what the outcome of the things I do is going to be. When it comes to service or my belonging to the community.
The world needs stewards now. And, there in early AA, Huxley thought, we got to take this sort of AA thing and spread it out around the world beyond people with addiction. And Bill Wilson thought that was a little, that's not quite what he was interested in.
Wait, say that again. What did he want to
do? Huxley thought this sort of AA-ness, the steps and the traditions was the way to run the world. AA is structurally what D. Hawk, the late D. Hawk, who was the CEO of Visa Finance, he called a chaordic organization, mixing chaos and order. And it's the opposite, it's the antithesis of the top-down command and control type of structure that most of capitalism is built on. And
no, I think Russell Brand, I get the sense that's exactly what he would like to do. That's his project. He wants to make the world into an AA meeting, which I think is kind of beautiful, if impractical.
Yeah. I think so. I think his book did a couple of things. It was tremendously sincere. I having never met him and never seen anything he did, I didn't like him, but I loved his book. And like I had prejudged him by the package. He looked like he was like pop culture, sort of, very shallow, and he's not that at all. Like I was dead wrong. Very sincere book, and he also had a way. The F steps, right? Admit that you're effed. Right? Could you be not effed? Could you by yourself get un-effed? Make a list of the people you've effed, right? That was just a little bit of Rule 62 when we really needed it, when people are taking things a little bit too seriously.
Well, and getting, my version of that too would be what, rather than the whole thing, just say, well, what could I do today to be a little bit less effed? Just a movement in the right direction. But when you say that, I just need to acknowledge, my history of judging people over and over and over again through my life. And one of the things you could almost, when we look back through it, you could almost guarantee that when I'm judging somebody very harshly, I barely know them.
And I think, again, this is something we learn in this process. We learn to approach people and situations with a beginner's mind, with a positive expectation, with high regard for the other person. Like we're dealing with people who, addicts in the worst state of their life, and we view them in high regard. We just habitually do that. We treat them as a peer, and we can see what they have to work with and where they can get started better than they can, right? And I think that repeating that just sort of builds all of those things that makes us better at all other areas of life and can lead to stewardship, leadership, and that type of thing.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say the steps are vital and useful, but they're not particularly original. There isn't a single original idea in the 12 steps.
Right.
But the traditions are remarkable. They're very insightful, and I think they speak better to the uniqueness of this AA legacy, which, this sort of chaotic structure with no top down, where all control is at the peripheral, like the group has ultimate authority. It doesn't have to be part of the AA structure, and it can still call itself an AA group and bark demands to the general service office anytime it wants. That's completely legitimate. Or they can get engaged to whatever degree they want to get engaged. And that's what this sort of type of structure is. And that might be that might be something for the masses. That's something we can take into our community activity with these sort of ideas in mind, right? Like, let's only be as organized as we need to be. Let's not get married to Robert's Rules of Orders, and because measuring like chaos and order, I prefer spontaneity and order, because I come from chaos. When I came to AA, I needed some structure, absolutely, but I didn't need rigidity. And we can be rigid in AA, and that's not helpful to anybody. But order and spontaneity, I think, are the perfect blend, right? Too much spontaneity, all chaos, no structure. That's no good. That's destructive. But going the other way is no good either. Too much structure, having a rules-based AA, where, I mean, that's a great idea, but who's going to police it? Who's going to be
Right.
in charge of vetting groups and individuals? Like it would be unworkable. And that's where the traditions were so brilliant. And nobody wanted them. The visionary, the founder, had this idea that was almost unsalvable, right? Everyone brags about him now, but nobody at the time was going, "That's a great idea, Bill. You're really onto something." They eyed it with suspicion.
Yeah, a lot of good ideas. We look back at that and in history and realize that, you know, certain people in history, you go like, if you've traveled back in time in that person's lifetime, it's like you'd find they weren't necessarily, you know, as popular as you think, because there's a lot of times, because like you were talking about, sometimes they're causing trouble. You know, what John Lewis called, you know, good trouble. You know, just stirring stuff up. But when you're talking about I like the use of the word spontaneous there, and when you're holding your hands up and spontaneous and organized or structured over here. And one of the things that has really occurred to me throughout my recovery and also my career is that very often even when we look at stuff like that, we still stay in a binary mindset. Is it this or is it that? And it's not even, it's not always a blend. I prefer continuums. I love continuums. And the goal is not to be dead center in the continuum, which is another thing that people will think you're supposed to do. No, the goal is to be able to travel the entire continuum. It's like if being rigidly structured is at one end of that, I may run into a situation in which that's exactly what's called for. You know,
Thank you for that. Because I fall prey to that, always wanting to be in perfect balance in the middle, where, you know, some of my greatest ideas come from living at the edge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's just like, it's like you just want to get some, you know, WD-40 and just be sure the continuum is lubricated enough so I can move back and forth, depending on the situation. You know, and that's just about, because that's also one of the things we're doing in our recovery is we're regaining, or for me, gaining for the first time, good judgment. How to have good judgment in my daily life.
The particular. Oh, I want to hear you go first, Joe. Sorry.
No. Well, I was going to go back to your concern about being more of an advocate for recovery. Like you talked about two things, your 5-year coming up. Maybe you can invite them. And if you do invite friends to an AA celebration, introduce them to people so they feel comfortable there, and make sure you explain they're here to support me. They're not here for our sobriety. They're just here to support me. And so people don't circle them and start giving them the 20 questions.
You know, that's such a wonderful idea. And, you know, there's this particular friend of mine, and I actually met him when I was in treatment somewhere like years ago while I was still trying to get it. And this friend of mine that I will take your advice and I will invite him to my cake day at my home group. But he went to my last one too. But man, do I relate to that ambivalence he has about, like, I know that he calls me a lot and I don't always pick up, but he sees what I'm doing and he wants some of that. But also, you know, he's in pain, and he just, like, you know, I think that, like, he still on some level feels that it works for him to kind of live the life that he's living, you know, or, you know, there's a kind of comfort and familiarity to it. You know, maybe I'll strip away the comfort, just familiarity. And
yes,
but I know that these things can take years and years. And I maybe, like, I was going to ask you guys about the particular quality of emotional sobriety and how service materializes within that framework. And I think maybe just the spontaneity, and to not apply rules so much on, like, you know, where does the service go and where does it come from? And emotional sobriety is about flexibility, right? So maybe it's a more of a broad accommodation of different kinds of, you know, service.
Well, being a communitarian, what's the term?
A communitarian. It's
A communitarian.
communitarianism or being a communitarian.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a part. Now I want to when I have something that's great, I want to be sure and quote cite the source. Who is it that says that?
You can get it right off of Wikipedia. You can find, if you Google it, you'll find it for sure.
Okay. It's like, because I mean that's what I was thinking in terms of when we're talking about the miracle of the organization of AA. I mean when I was coming up in my education, people it was cited by one of my professors as this impossible to explain worldwide leaderless organization. If anybody's ever tried to have a leaderless group, if 6 or 7 people, it's so hard to do. I mean, I worked a lot with group dynamics and stuff. It's so hard to do. It's like it is absolutely fascinating, and I think we can look at it and explain some of that and see how it's working, but how it came to be, I have no idea. That's a strange evolution.
Don't have far to look. Like sometimes I'm talking about this and I can tell people are resisting. I can hear them thinking, Joe, that's a beautiful liberal myth. Very nice, but this is the real world, right? Or a libertarian myth. And okay, well, let's give some concrete examples of where chaos and order work in perfect harmony. The universe, nature, evolution. We're just going back to the basics. We're not inventing something new, right? We're just stripping away all of that man-made type of approach to constructs that has to be competitive and has to be binary, and it doesn't.
Absolutely. That's
well, humans, they can thrive in structures, but they also like to digress. So,
well, that's another thing that is, just if you only think of AA service as working with another alcoholic one-on-one, that's great for extroverts. How are introverts going to get engaged and stay in service? One of the articles in the Grapevine is Confessions of a Spreadsheet Loving Nerd. She found her service and love from the area assembly, right, where she got to do things behind the scenes in the service of others, planting a shade tree under which she will never sit, right? Things for the future to ensure a future for others, and without having to just take a pill from the hyper stimulation of an AA meeting, right, where there's 50 people, everyone's wants to talk next, and that can be rough on certain individuals. And there's so much that needs to be done, and there's no sign-up sheet, there's no vetting, there's no waiting list. You can be going to a treatment center next week. You can be chairing your group's meeting sometime this month. You can be helping co-host the Zoom tomorrow, and you're not expected to be the expert. You're expected to just be willing to try and learn. Where else do you find on-the-job training like you find here?
Well, the other thing you're talking about too is in terms of the extroverts versus the introverts. It's is that your service work doesn't have to be done on stage. It's like that. There are some things that we may want recognition for. We some people may want it more than others, but it's like if somebody's a true introvert and is going like, I'm not interested in that. I don't even if I'm just doing it and then people are going to respond to that what I'm doing. It's like I kind of, it's like anonymous giving. It's about your own integrity. It's like I feel good about. And I think all of that blends together when we just talk about reconnecting to or connecting for the first time to the rest of humanity. I mean, because that's one of the things I learned it came to in the late 90s or mid 90s is doing therapy. Was through that 80s and 90s the therapy. It was so it was powerful stuff, but it seemed to me to end with I've reclaimed myself and I'm taking care of myself and I have good boundaries for myself. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I kept started thinking like, why are we doing that if not to reconnect to the rest of the world, to the universe? It's like, and I don't mean that as a damn hippie, just, I mean, in terms of, no, I want to be a part of the bigger working mechanism of this world. And I think that's why, so I think of this as we take ourselves as component parts of the whole, and we work hard to repair ourselves, to heal ourselves. And the service part is part of the healing, but it's also part of reconnecting.
Yeah.
Becoming a communitarian.
Becoming a community.
Yeah.
And it's not one or the other. It's not one then the other.
Right.
They're all ingredients. You can't make the cake without including all the ingredients.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Being of service, it just kind of reminds us that we are useful, or like, I guess what I'm talking about is like how it reflexively, the act of giving service, it can really nourish and kind of empower us in selfish ways, right? Selflessness.
Well, yeah, and the truth is, when I'm working with somebody who has very low self-esteem, who's come from a traumatic background, for instance, and it's like some things that some people may just take for granted, like the fact that if you do something to help somebody else, if you're kind to somebody else, that matters to that person. It's like you'll be surprised how many people would not know that. They go like, because they're coming from an internal message that says I don't matter. So therefore it's logic. It's like, therefore I couldn't matter to this other person. And I want people to be able to see that, I'm going back to the grocery store line. If the person ahead of you in line was an asshole and you step up there with just the intention of being kind to the person at the register, it's like you've helped that person. You've made a difference in that person's life. And it's like, and this is where I'm saying to people, it's like, we try to resist self-esteem, because it's so foreign to us a lot of times when we first are in this stuff. But the idea is what I tell people, to give yourself credit where credit is due is not just a right, but it's a responsibility. You need to, I don't want you thinking more highly of yourself than is congruent with what you're doing. But I want you to feel, it's not about being egotistical. It's just about saying, I did that and it felt good. It felt right. Or I'm good at this thing. And people will go, oh, I don't want to know that I'm having this power, this effect on other people, even in a positive way, because it's scary to reconnect.
Only at the beginning.
And the good news is, what we can say to people is, I promise you, it gets better. It gets much better. And you move to a place where, like Joe C., it becomes a damn habit.
This idea of anonymity, I think, when properly understood, is a good one. Like, it's an old-fashioned idea that, nobody should go on CNN and talk about their recovery and their membership in AA. That was a concern that proved not to be of any consequence. Because if Britney Spears has a relapse, people don't think, oh, AA doesn't work. Not everybody, right? They just think Britney Spears needs help, right? So there's plenty of times where these things have become public and sort of kitchen table discussion, but it hasn't harmed our reputation as a recovery community. But what does it mean? It means that we are not about personality, we're about principles. That it's any story is as valuable as the other story. Someone walking into the room, it's so important to say, okay, like if I'm chairing a meeting, okay, I just heard what Neil said, and I heard what Xander said, and I kind of knew what they were going to say, but you're new here. Tell us what you think, right? You're not indoctrinated with all this stuff. Give us a fresh look at things.
Beautiful.
And they might say, no, I just want to listen. That's fine. but we invited them. Just like
Mhm.
Patrick, you invite your friend to come and participate in your recovery, and they say yes or no. That doesn't matter, but it's the thoughtful gesture that has a lasting ripple effect.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't think he thinks he matters, but he
Well,
does.
of
Yeah.
course he does. Yeah. It's like, and it's, yeah, it's a tough one to get in when you spend a lifetime not knowing that. And it's not, it's because that's not something that you work on and becomes true. It's already true. And it really is, my glasses being on my head and me telling you guys I'm distraught because I can't find my glasses. You look at me and go, Thom, this is so easy. It's like simple, but not easy.
Well, I've never, I'm sure people will be mad at me over time because I don't know how to not represent that the rooms of AA have been a big help to me, that the 12 steps and kind of like these, I spend a lot of time in these spaces. And I guess, the anonymous aspect of you don't really talk as much about it. Like I don't know, just to me, what identity I have, it was so, that part of the equation was so crucial. And so I don't know, I kind of need to say that that's where I am and that's where I've been. And,
Well, I think we have to
Yeah.
look at the historical context because when people were first going to AA and stuff, I mean, we were talking about in the whole culture, alcoholism was seen as a major shortcoming of people. It was anything from you're just a lesser person, you're a weaker person, or you're an evil person. It's like, with Jelinek's work, it's like to change this into thinking of it as a disease, so that primarily so that basically it's about something that we can treat instead of judge. But one of the things that I think, what I was thinking about that a moment ago when you were talking, Joe, it's like one of the results of how we have done this work as a organization, as how AA has done this, is that the world is very familiar with what 12 steps of AA are. Now, some of them don't understand. They misunderstand them because they've never been there, and they judge them because they're scared. But we understand it. It's like, and that's part of it. It's like the idea that you have to protect your identity in there, absolutely doesn't make any sense. I'm in Nashville, and I mean, I always want to credit the country artist Larry Gatlin, because he was the first guy here that I know of. We were working in some PR stuff with just getting the word out about alcoholism, and Larry Gatlin he came out, and he was just, as these days when you do that, I mean, it's a wonderful thing, but it's like nobody had been doing that. He came out and talked about his addiction, his cocaine addiction. He told parts of his story that were just sure initially were embarrassing as hell, but it's like he did so much good. He wasn't doing it as an advertisement for 12 step, but and we got some flack from that kind of stuff because we didn't, in the media stuff, we didn't necessarily, screen out references to 12-step programs or the phrases that people know are connected to 12-step program. It's like,
that's another
amazing
thing about the chaordic organization is we don't have rules, we have traditions.
Yes.
No one enforces them. They're wise old sage-like ideas that anyone can take or leave as they see
traditions.
fit. So
that's it. I think about that with families, traditions. They create so many conflicts. It's like, but what about traditions that are flexible? Because you see people come to that. We need to, now that I'm no longer in that family I grew up in, and I have a family of my own, maybe we can use some of that, but maybe we can change the tradition. Maybe we can do this a little differently instead of treating it like the God's truth.
Firm on principle, flexible on method. Something else I learned in AA service. There was a former delegate of the area I'm in And one of the things I admired most about this man is I knew he had strong opinions, but I never knew what they were, because he would talk about an issue at the General Service Conference and he'd start explaining one side of it. And you go, well, obviously, that's what we got to do. And then he'd start explaining the other side of it. Well, yeah, that was a dumb idea. Obviously, this is this is what we got to consider. But he gave both sides such reverence. You never knew where he personally stood, because his role was to bring this back to everybody to judge for themselves, so they could tell him how he should go and vote for it, right? So he was just conveying the message, and he was able to do that in a way where he respected the fact that other people who disagree with me love AA as much as I do.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. We can say the same thing about democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That Republicans love America, Democrats love America, right?
Absolutely.
I just, I have a different way of
there's
visualizing how to protect it.
Well, I say this to couples all the time, because very often what you're trying to get couples out of is just debating perception. I'll put an object between them that looks very different on each side, and I'll say, okay, now describe what you see, and they see what we're doing, but I ask them to go ahead and get into an argument to try to convince their partner that what they're looking at is, the red back of a playing card, and the other person is arguing, no, it's a 7 of hearts. It's like I'm going to have something very simple, because there are two. If you want to know about the whole, you have to be aware of multiple perspectives. And I point out in that analogy that I'm sitting over here, I have a different perspective. If I hold the card just right, I can't see either one of those. I can't see the back or I just see that there's a card there, and it's like, we need to get to that place. That's where problem solving happens.
And that's another part of emotional sobriety, about creative problem solving, right?
I love this topic because there's so much more room for us to speak to it. And Allen will be returning next week with Joe, and we're all going to chop it up about recovery, emotional sobriety, and service. So I'm really stoked to see you guys again, and to see Allen.
He doesn't like being left out, man. It's like,
I can hear it already. Joe, I heard what you said, and I think what you meant to say was,
it's like, Joe can be there while I'm not, while I'm absent, but he better stick around when I return.
That's right. That's right. That's good.
All right. Well, be well, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Tend your life, tend your myth, cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.